Now, by this point, I would say I can imagine, but I don't have to imagine, that some persons are taking umbrage with the proposition that God exists as a statement that we consider as a truth proposition and entertain seriously rather than dismissing out of hand. And on the other hand, other persons are taking umbrage with my saying that this is an inherently metaphorical statement and an inescapably metaphorical statement. So let's take it as an existential proposition. Let's take it, all of these God is fill in the blanks. Let's try God is existent and see what that does. The first thing that we notice is that if we say God is existent, we are necessarily saying that God is existent in such a quality or qualities of existence that that existence is unlike the way in which anything else exists. If God exists in a way unlike apples exist, unlike I exist, unlike pink unicorns exist. Because it is a singular proposition, and the proposition is one of singularity. It is necessarily unlike these other existential claims. Let's try a different kind of existential claim and see what happens. The Vancouver Route 99 bus schedule exists. If I'm talking about a printed bus schedule, something that I can hold in my hands, then I'm making one kind of existential claim. But the Route 99 Vancouver bus schedule is not entirely encompassed by this piece of paper. So that is not the entirety of the existential claim. I'm also talking about a structure of information. I am talking about the information that is recorded on and conveyed via this schedule, via this piece of paper. But I'm not just saying that either, because that information is also a structure of intent. The bus is intended to be at this location at this time, and we are conveying information regarding this intent in order to shape and inform other intents. So when I say that this bus schedule exists, I may be talking about a physical existence, I may be talking about a conceptual existence, I may be talking about the structure of intent. And the trick is, I didn't say the idea of the bus schedule exists. I just said the bus schedule exists, but incorporated into that we have aspects of the idea of the bus schedule. But if we took the other end of this and said the idea of the bus schedule exists, then I have I am discarding for consideration the paper, the physical representational apparatus. Although I could say that I'm talking about the idea of the printed paper. But, again, that's a very different kind of existential claim than the paper itself, than claiming that the paper itself exists. This gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. All of this is built upon strata of inferred reference, inferred analogy, where the idea of the bus schedule exists in ways like other ideas exist, or the physical apparatus of the bus, physical representation of the bus schedule exists in ways analogous to other physical objects, or the structure of information exists in ways analogous to other structures of information, or the structure of intent exists in ways analogous to other structures of intent. It's all of this is built on those inferred references and inferred comparisons that don't apply when we're talking about something that we have definitionally declared incomparable. So, when I say that the statement God exists is a metaphor, I am not saying that the statement itself, God exists, contains the entire metaphorical expression. I am saying that we are taking this statement, God exists, as a component of, the first component of, a metaphorical connection, a metaphorical comparison. And for the second portion, any possible analogy is necessarily going to be as poetic as shall I compare thee to a summer's day, because direct correlation and congruence cannot be drawn. That's part of where we're going with the proposition that God is, fill in the blank, is always a metaphorical statement. The interesting thing about this, at least to me, the very interesting thing about this is that we're kind of working our way toward an exploration of the structure of meaningful propositions, or at least a proposition which might be considered meaningful. And through this, we may be, through this question of God and the problems of any kind of correlative structure of meaning, we're learning a bit about the flexibility of the ways in which we express, experience, and interact with propositions of meaning, or meaningful propositions. And this is part of the office of theology, because it is not, and ultimately cannot be concerned with propositions that lend themselves to empirical verification, and creationists take note. If you're talking about something that can be empirically verified, theology has no business participating. But because we are denied the shortcut, and the epistemological shortcut of, well, let's see if it's true. Let's just create the conditions, execute the experiment, and see if the results are what we expect. Because of this, we are interacting entirely with criteria of satisfaction and aesthetic composition. And for the record, I consider internal consistency of syntax to be an aesthetic principle, not an epistemological one. So, we'll be getting a little bit more, we'll be going a little bit further on down the line. We're not quite at the end of the road yet.